Hey, how are we doing, folks? So, this is a follow up video to a video I created last week. It was titled For the Love of Dog, and it had a cute little picture and a thumbnail of our Lab SayJay. And the topic of discussion in that video was pretty much centered around the news that we had gotten um, regarding SayJay's condition, and that was a diagnosis of lymphoma, which is a very aggressive cancer. And, obviously, needless to say, we were devastated by the news. And the way that it came across to me when the vet informed me of it was that we had probably very little time, and that it was, a very serious condition. And we would have to do whatever we could just to try and keep her comfortable, but it really came across to me as being urgent, and like the days were literally numbered at that point. And so, yeah, I mean, we were devastated by it, which led to the creation of that video. And in that video, I talked a lot about just, the history of our dogs and pet ownership in general, and just a lot of the things that come along with that experience. And I talked about it, a little bit in there. That what had happened with SayJay, and that being what ultimately led to me making that video. But today, this is more of an informative video, because there's been a lot of lessons learned from that experience, because we didn't lose SayJay right away. She actually lasted for, I think, just over a month from the time of that diagnosis. And so, looking back on it, we were greatly blessed that we got that additional time with her, because we certainly weren't of the mindset that that's how it was going to be. Um, so we did end up losing SayJay last Friday, and it was extremely difficult. And I talked a lot about, this in that previous video. I encourage you to check it out. I'll plug a little picture of it here somewhere so you know what it looks like. And then I do encourage you to check out that video, because it gets into a lot of general information, about the responsibilities that come along with dog ownership and what it looks like in the long run, and things of that nature. But anyway, yeah, we lost SayJay last Friday, and I'm telling you now, we fought hard for that last month. I mean, luckily, I was in a position here where I'm home, working from home each day, and I could be here with her and care for her, because that's absolutely what was required in that last month with her. It required full time attention. But with that said, she did extremely well. I mean, she responded immediately to the steroids that were prescribed to her, and immediately regained her eyesight back, which was a huge blessing, because I was so nervous about that. Because with her being completely blind like she was, it created a pretty major dilemma for us, because there's just no way I could like lift her up and carry her outside and for her to go to the bathroom, and and then just all the the things that would come along with having a blind dog in the household. So yeah, I mean, the fact that she regained her eyesight almost immediately was remarkable. And she also began to experience what I thought was a bounce back, and I immediately switched gears with everything with her. We stopped feeding kibble completely, the dog food that you buy, from the store. And I started to make her 100% homemade organic diet. I was using, organic meats that we eat ourselves, in many cases in the beginning. And mixing a lot of that type of stuff in with vegetables and rice, So I would make a big batch of this that would last her, 4 or 5 days or so. And then I'd have to make another batch. And so, with that and everything else that came with caring for her, it was almost like a full-time, gig taking care of her for that last month because she needed assistance with going outside still and, administering the medication and making sure that she was eating enough and getting the right nutrients and minerals and whatnot into her during that time. And so I was, because of the dog food that I was making, not having calcium in it, I would actually take our eggshells from our chickens and I was crushing them up in a bag and adding crushed shell powder into her food to get her the calcium that was um basically not in the food that I was then giving her. So there was a concern about calcium deficiency. And so I was giving it to her in the form of eggshells and just all this stuff, just a lot of work around it. And so, that's, you know, one of the main points I want to get across here is that when you are dealing with a dog that's, an elder dog like this, and that is now diagnosed with something such as cancer, it involves the owner stepping up and really, looking out for them and caring for them, on a whole nother elevated level from, previously what you had been doing. And so it just involved a lot of work and a lot of effort, and I was glad to do it. And like I said, I felt very fortunate that I was able to be here with her and to have that time with her, for the last month to care for her and to really, I mean, she was a queen before, but she was a queen on a whole nother level here for the last month, because that's what she was in our house. I mean, we are devastated by this loss. I mean, I'm sitting here now and I'm used to her, laying right here, and it's very difficult, losing a pet like this. It leaves one hell of a void in the house, as I'm sure you can imagine. But back to the lessons learned. So one, it requires a lot of effort and responsibility, from the pet owner. Uh, but another thing that I learned during that time, like I said, the steroid that was prescribed for 2 weeks with 2 pills a day, one in the morning and one in the evening for 2 weeks. And then after the 2 weeks, you were supposed to cut down to 1 pill a day until that prescription ran out. And so to me, this is a big one because I really wish that things would have went a little different here had I known. Which, hopefully with this type of video, if you find yourself in this condition someday, keep this in mind. But when we hit that point after 2 weeks, and this 2 weeks was a pretty remarkable shift in where she had been at, you know, leading up to this and where she now was after, taking this medication and eating a organic homemade diet and just all the special treatments she was getting. I mean, she was doing great. I mean, you could obviously tell there was an issue there, and she wasn't obviously like perfect and in 100% health, but like I seriously thought that maybe things were turning around. And because I read a lot, obviously, at this time, because this is my dog and I want to do whatever I can to extend her life, to make her comfortable and possibly even heal her of this thing. And so I was reading a lot of different information about, the dog food and starving the cancer and high protein and all this different stuff. And so I had high hopes that, that's what was taking place there. But when I dropped her off that medication of 2 pills a day down to the one, it only took a day or two. Well, no, it was probably closer to 4 or 5 days where then I began to notice immediately, like I came out one morning and had to, like, could barely get her to go outside. She could barely walk. I ended up making uh, something to carry her on, which took two of us to do, but it allowed me to like scoot her onto this thing, and we could carry her out almost like a gurney, or the actual name of what these things are called are escaping me, but I made one at home so that I could slip her onto it and we could carry her out and then help her up, and she could go to the bathroom. She'd plop back down. I'd, roll her back onto it, and we'd pick it up and bring her back in and roll her back off of it. And so that's what was happening. And I thought we were, that one morning there, I was sitting outside with her because I thought that this was the last day. And I was like communicating with my wife that morning. She was at work, and I told her, I said, I don't know, this isn't looking good. And I think I'm going to call the vet and see if we can take her back up to 2 pills, because it seems like this correlates with, dropping the dosage down to 1 pill. And if this diagnosis is terminal and she's ultimately going to die anyway, what does it matter? Like, if we would just continue on if there's a chance that she'll live longer and be more comfortable, and all these things. And so I had to wait, until the vet opened that morning. But once they did, I called and I asked her if we could, bump her back up to 2 pills, because I could tell that it correlated, that the decline in her health and the way that she was acting absolutely correlated with dropping her down to 1 pill. And the assistant there couldn't give me an answer, at that time, but she said she would run it by the vet and get back to me, which she did, an hour or two later. And basically she said, yeah, I mean, this is just care to try and keep her comfortable, at this time. And, so yeah, I mean, you can take her back up to 2 pills, which immediately got me thinking, like, well, then why did we ever drop her down to 1 to begin with? I mean, because honestly, like that morning, I thought we were going to be taking her to the vet. I thought we were at the end. And so it just it bothered me a little bit that's the way that it was handled, when I felt like, if she can continue taking 2, why would you not just take 2 until it's, time? And because once I did re-administer the 2 pills a day, it was a couple days, but boom, she was back. And then we got another almost 2 weeks. Well, yeah, I mean, it was probably another week and a half we got out of her because of bringing her back up to 2 pills a day, which to me was remarkable, And so yeah, that's a big lesson learned, in my opinion. If you would come into this type of circumstance and you're faced with something similar, don't do that and question it immediately. If you're dealing with something that's terminal like this, and they're gonna ultimately die anyway, there's really no reason that I can think of that makes sense to drop them down to 1 pill a day. So, in hindsight, if I could do it all over again, I would have never dropped her down to 1. I would have kept her on 2. And I think that we would have never experienced that little, week or so in between where she had went back down and then came back up. Like, I just think that could have been, eliminated or bypassed completely if we just would have kept her on 2. And so that's in my opinion, a pretty big lesson learned for anybody that would be going through something similar like this. And, cancer is very common in dogs, unfortunately, and in humans. I mean, it's a part of life, unfortunately, today. And I have a lot I could say about it, but I'm just going to leave it at that. So yeah, what else? So, one of the biggest things when you're in this situation where you have a dog that their days are numbered, the biggest obstacle to overcome is knowing when it's time. It's the hardest decision that I think it's the hardest decision you'll ever make, because typically this isn't a decision that you make with the humans around you, when these type of things happen, where their life is literally in your hands. And, unfortunately, that's been the case in every situation with my dogs, where I had to ultimately make the decision to pull the plug, because I felt that to keep them would be completely selfish and just not something I could do in good conscience. And we were at that point Friday with SayJay. And, that night before, it was Thursday evening, what I would do is try and keep her on the hardwood floors and the floors with a smooth surface, because it was cooler and whatnot. And it seemed like that's where she liked to be. Plus, just in case there would be any accidents, I didn't want it happening, in our living room on the carpets or whatever. So I would kind of keep her in this area. But what I would do is slide a blanket underneath her, and then I would pull her across the floor on the blanket to get her over here where we were at, so that she could be with us, and I would sit with her on the floor and whatnot. And that night before, I was doing that, as I had been pretty much every night previously. But when I brought her over that night, I wasn't sure if I upset her stomach by doing this or what, but she did throw up a little bit after I got her over here, and I didn't think too much of it. I just thought maybe I disrupted her stomach or whatever by dragging her over here on the blanket. But now, looking back, I feel like it was a sign that things were starting to decline, because it was the next morning then when I woke up and I came out, I could tell immediately that something had changed, because every morning when I walk out of my bedroom, as soon as I make eye contact with her, her tail's wagging, and that's what tells me she's still there. She's still in the game. She's still in the fight. And if she's still in the fight, I'm still in the fight. So that's how it was every morning. I'd come out and she'd look up at me and we'd make eye contact and she'd wag her tail. And, then I'd get her food. And that was something that I could tell she really enjoyed, that special treatment, at the end there of the homemade food and all that. But that morning, before this, I was actually able to get her. We got back to the point where I didn't have to carry her out anymore. I could actually just help her hind end up. And once I could get her up on her four legs, she was able to walk out, go off the deck, go down, go to the bathroom, and then she'd come back over to the deck, and we'd have to lift her up onto the deck. And then she could walk back in the house, which is a big improvement from actually having to carry her in and out on a gurney or whatever. But that morning, I couldn't get her up, and I could tell just by looking in her eyes that she wasn't feeling good. And like I said, her tail wasn't wagging when I came out, and so I knew immediately that things had changed. Got her outside and sat her down, and she could barely get up. I knew she had to go to the bathroom because, dealing with this, she wasn't going out as much. We tried to get her out at least 3 times a day, maybe 4, but it had been a while since she had been out the previous evening. And so I knew she had to go, but I had to help her up. And she was just so weak that morning. And even like when she went into the grass to go to the bathroom, like her paw like folded underneath her leg, and she could barely like hold herself up to pee. And yeah, it was just, I could just tell right away that we're now at this point. And being that it was a holiday weekend, it's actually, that day is Good Friday, and we're going into a holiday weekend. We were faced with needing to make this decision because we didn't want to go into the weekend knowing that she's now at this point and then have a possibility of like something happening and not have, because we're way out in the mountain and an hour and 15 minutes away from a dog emergency room. And we just didn't want to put her in a, we didn't want to jeopardize her and put her in a position where something like could happen and not be able to get her somewhere quick enough. And we didn't want to put ourselves through, dealing with that either. And so we had to make a decision that morning. And it's obviously a decision that you don't take lightly. And I just knew that this was it. And it gave me at least a little bit of peace knowing how hard her and I had fought to keep her alive for the previous month. And yeah, it's a very difficult decision to have to make. But that was the decision that we made that morning. And so we had to say our goodbyes as a family with her, my boys, and it's terrible. It's a terrible, terrible thing to go through. And we carried her out and got her loaded in the vehicle for that one last ride. She loved the vehicle rides, and the whole way down there, I was looking in the rear view at her, and it was like she knew that it was her last ride too. And it was just very, very, very difficult. And yeah, I mean, it's the hardest thing is that last ultimate decision at the end, knowing when it's time. And I feel like when you put your selfishness aside, it's naturally evident when that time is upon you. And we knew we were there, Friday morning. And so, yeah, we had to let SayJay go Friday and say goodbye to our queen. And miss her dearly, feel lost without her. Just won't be the same, but we've been through this before. We know how it goes. And so, yeah, anyway, I just wanted to talk about a little bit of that because I feel like it's, there's so many people out there that are dog pet owners in general. And, this is something that we will all go through. And then, with the experiences, like I said, around the whole cancer issue, I just felt like there was some valuable lessons there to take away from it. And so hopefully, you did get something from it as well. Now, I will just say one last thing that I wanted to make sure, like, you can also tell with eating. She went from eating those meals that I was making her and loving it, and all the treats, because I was making her homemade treats, and to where she didn't want it anymore. And then, like, I was able to get her just to eat the hamburger and rice. So we were at that point for like a few days to a week there where she was only eating that. And then I was able to get her to start eating some hard boiled eggs that I'd cut up and throw in there with it. And it just got to the point the last day or two there where she was only eating the treats. I couldn't get her to eat anymore. And when they hit that time that, when they're turning down food, something's seriously wrong, and they can't survive like that. So that's another thing to look out for. Obviously, as long as they're still drinking and eating, everything's good. But once they stop taking water and stop taking any food, you're there. So anyway, yeah, like I said, I just thought there was some valuable information in there. So hopefully, you've got something from this. Anyway, I am Brad Casper. This is Casper's Corner. And till the next one, we're out.